Hello, I'm back again, and I bet you're sick of seeing me already this weekend. This is my last interview of today, and this young lady needs no introductions. I've been friends with her since 2016, and it's kind of one of those friendships that has evolved and has been, very, very dear to me more than anything. She actually proved to me that trust is a huge thing within a friendship, and I'm actually very pleased to say that I've got a lot of respect for this lady. And I'm going to bring her on anyway. Her name is Barrand, and she's an author, but she's also a paranormal investigator. And she also does a little bit more than just the average paranormal things. But I'll let you have a chat with her. So, hi, how are you doing?
Hello.
Like sister, we're twinning this morning.
Oh, look at this. We're rocking the black polo neck.
You can't go wrong without a black polo neck, though, can you?
Well, it's great for hiding the COVID double chin.
Exactly. You don't need a mask when you've got these on, do you? So it's not too bad. But I was talking about how we first met. We met back in 2016, which seems like an age ago now.
Was it really 2016?
Yeah.
Wow, in Tatton Old Hall.
It was, and that was a really good. That was probably my first taste of a public event, working for a different company. Mm-hmm. But needless to say, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, was it?
It wasn't. I think the company shortly went bust not long after, and I was there just as a guest with Lindsay, my sister, and my best friend Catherine. And yeah, thankfully we were on your team and not the other two ladies' team. It's scary. It's more scary than the ghosts.
I know, and it's funny because I remember just being like, I just kind of held back and kind of wanted to see exactly what everybody was doing. But when these two ladies who were on this event, who were running this event, said that they were mediums, I was like, oh, this is good then. I'll see exactly what they pick up. But it became quite apparent early on that it was just a load of rubbish.
Oh, they were dreadful. I mean, the whole thing just started off badly because there were guests turning up late, and then they didn't sort of start until a good hour after we were supposed to start. We were all freezing cold, sat waiting for just two people, I think, were late.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, thankfully we were on your team and we got a lot of activity.
It was brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I just remember being sat in the main hallway in Tatton Old Hall and having one of the group leaders. She was stood there saying, "Oh, there's a man on the stairs," and she was describing this gentleman, and I'm sitting there thinking, what on earth are you talking about? There's no guy on the stairs. And I looked towards my left and I was like, there's somebody stood here, but that's not the gentleman you're talking about. So then I knew then, I was like, oh, I'm not really feeling this. So I'm glad I kind of took everybody away, because I could see that the group was getting quite agitated and everybody was complaining. And, I wasn't there as a group leader. I was just there to kind of observe and get involved, but I could quite see it was going to start to turn a little bit hair raising.
Yeah. So, that's right.
So we went into the barn, and I think it was when the PSB 11 came out. So it was one of the newest pieces of equipment back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we heard was phenomenal, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. There was that old man sort of presence in the corner, and there was no doubt that he was there throughout the whole seance that we were doing. We were calling out, and it was quite frightening. You felt him quite close to you, didn't you?
Yeah. And it was funny because I remember that to this day, and I will never ever forget listening to the PSB 11, and it's quite that wretched sound, isn't it? It's grating. It hurts your ears after a while. But when we heard William, it was just as clear as day, and it was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was like somebody was speaking through it was a voice. It was so clear, and goosebumps moment.
And I still think about that now to this day, because if it hadn't have been for you, I wouldn't have kind of set up Phantasmic Paranormal,
Wow.
which is, you know, I've got a lot to thank you for, to be honest.
No, you were fantastic, and you know, we had to say to you afterwards, you know, thank you, because you made the evening. I travelled down from South Wales to Manchester for the event, and you know, it was, I think my friend Catherine, it was her first ever paranormal investigation as well. So you know, we enjoyed it because of you, and because of that, what happened in the barn, and William, thanks to William, come forward, and yeah, it was brilliant. So we said to you afterwards, you were fantastic, and you were like, well, thank you, because you didn't know it was your first. We said, I think you said it was my first one, or only like the second or third one you'd ever done. And I said, well, you honestly wouldn't have known. We thought you were like really good. Well, you were. And I was surprised. I was so surprised that you were new to it.
Yeah, and it's good because our friendship has kind of grown over the past, I want to say, like 4.5 years now, and we've done a fair bit together, haven't we? We've been to Great Cloton Halls, and we've done all sorts. But you personally have kind of evolved, and you know, you've written books, and you know, you've written about Welsh folklore, and you know, those books is amazing. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you. Well, I'm not like a folklorist, you know, I'm not an expert, but what I've done, because I was born in Manchester, and my parents were both Mancunian, but we moved to Wales when I was 13. So it opened up this world to me as an English person moving into Wales, how much the Welsh embrace the paranormal and the supernatural, and they're still really quite superstitious. So my book was sort of based on some of the stories and the local stuff. But yeah, I'm still learning every day about new folklore stories. It's just fascinating.
And you and Lindsay went over to Ireland as well to investigate the Fae, didn't you?
Oh, we did. We went, we met Barry Fitzgerald from Ghost Hunters International. Absolutely lovely guy. He's so nice. And he invited a few people, I think there were 10 of us in total, to go over to County Sligo and investigate this fairy hill that had a lot of legends attached to it, a lot of sightings of the Fae. And in fact, it's privately owned land, and the lady that owns it has an actual fairyland set up there, like, you know, ornamental fairies and lakes and things, but she very much believes that it is attracting the Fae. And we went over purely out of interest, because Lindsay and I had seen Barry at a paranormal convention, and it was the first time we'd met him, and his talk, it was so different, because it wasn't the usual ghosts, spirits, demons. It was all about the Fae. And I'd never really thought of fairies as ever being anything other than Tinkerbell in Disney stories. And I thought, hang on a minute, there's this grown man here in his late 40s thinking that he believes in fairies. So I had to find out more. And yeah, that weekend was incredible. And some of the experiences I will never, ever forget. And I 100% believe in fairies. They are quite dark and quite scary. They are not little pretty, sparkly things at all. They're quite, yeah, it's hard to explain them. Fairies is such a misleading word now, thanks to stories and fairy stories. They're not what we think they are. But yeah, we definitely experienced the Fae that weekend.
So what experience did you have that kind of sticks in your mind?
Well, it was really weird. The first night we had to walk up the fairy hill, so it was a really steep, almost a mountain, to be honest. When you say hill, it's quite deceiving. We camped at the bottom, so we stayed there for 3 nights, and we walked up to the top of this hill, and there was like a cairn built there, and Barry was talking about local legends and stories. And it was weird. We were there at sundown. So apparently dusk and dawn are the times when, in between two worlds, that you're most likely to get some kind of paranormal experience, and when the Fae are most able to connect with us, because the veil is thinnest between those times. So we were there as the sun went down, and the rocks across the top of the hill just took on this blue colour. I've got a photograph of it. And there was this atmosphere. It's really hard to explain. We felt we were surrounded and being watched. And we saw people, odd things happened. We saw people in the distance. One minute they were there and the next minute they weren't there. It's really hard to explain. But it was like these two people walking away. We all said, well, who is that? Because that's private land. Who are those two people? You could just see figures. And then some of us saw them, and as the others turned to look, they vanished. They were just gone. So it's like, well, who were they? And we confirmed afterwards with the landowner, nobody is permitted to walk there. So we don't to this day know who that was. The second night, the weather turned so bad, which is typical Ireland.
Wales.
Yeah, and Wales and Ireland.
Yeah, sorry.
They're so closely similar in terms of weather, and the landscape's very similar. But yeah, so we had to cancel because it just wasn't safe to walk up there. It was torrential rain. So we decided to all go and get some food and have a little barbecue. And we sat around a campfire. But the weird thing was, this weather was raging all around us. There was wind, rain, like I'm talking incredible torrential rain. Where our campfire was, there wasn't a drop of rain. We were just sat there all around this fire, and Barry was telling us ghost stories. He's the best person ever to tell ghost stories. He's got that Irish accent, and he's been all over the world. So he was telling us ghost stories. And so we had this lovely relaxed evening swapping stories, and quite a few people retired to bed after midnight, well, back to their tent, which was quite a walk away now, up into a field. And then the rest of us were just sat there stoking the last bit of the fire, and, a bit sleepy. And the next thing you know, we were surrounded slowly by all these little sparkly lights, like literally fairy lights. So we were saying, well, what's that over there? They were twinkling, and we would look, and then they'd be over there, and then they'd be over there. And before 5 minutes was over, we were surrounded by little lights they weren't fireflies, they weren't glowworms. It was like that, but they were in the shrubs and the bushes around us. And we also saw black figures, like, I could only explain, like as if there was a black dog, and it was surrounding us, and it was walking around in and out of the shadows. Now, the other thing that kind of cemented that what we were seeing was we weren't hallucinating. We took no drugs, honestly. Barry's got a dog. In fact, there's two dogs. The lady that owned the area had a little dog as well, a little pug. And Barry's dog is a pure sort of white German Shepherd. Beautiful dog. I don't know if he's still alive or not. I must find out, because he was gorgeous. Barry's dog stayed with us. Barry and Donna, his wife, had gone to bed. And he said the really weird thing was this dog never leaves his side, but it decided to stay with us in the camp area, which was weird in itself. But this dog was really growling. Both of them were really frightened. They were following this shadow round, snarling and growling, keeping whatever it was away. So we sat watching this display for about an hour. There were only about 4 or 5 of us watching this display of lights. Like, we couldn't believe what we were seeing. We had to go to bed. We were falling asleep. And during that night, the weather, because as we walked back to the tent, the weather was drenched us. We got back in the tent, zipped it all up. I fell asleep. I had earplugs in as well because it was so loud with the rain. And something in the night pushed me from the outside of the tent so hard that I rolled right and bumped into Lindsay, my sister. And I woke up thinking, well, what the hell is that? Because I got my earplugs out and the weather outside was just, nobody would have in their right mind have stepped a foot outside their tent. The next morning, I told everybody to gather at breakfast, and they all had the same experience, that there was something walking around the tent, pushing us from the outside.
That's strange.
I can't explain it. Yeah, people might say, well, it was somebody playing a practical joke, but honestly, nobody was there for that.
Yeah, but you look at it though, and when it's torrential rain, you've got mud around the tent. You would have had some form of footprints or something like that to see if somebody would have been there, wouldn't you?
Exactly. Barry thought that he was recording it. He was there the whole weekend with his notebook and pen, and he said the footfall that he could hear was as if it was four. Does that make sense? Like as if it was something four-legged. But I don't know. And there were no animals in the field, so it wasn't sheep or anything like that.
It is madness when you because I've never heard that story, because I've always wanted to ask you, but I've never kind of really delved into it. But I know you had some phenomenal experiences there, and it sounds fantastic. It sounds like a brilliant place to visit. Does he still do these tours of the Fae? And
no, Barry's well, I've lost touch with him in the last year because he decided to take himself off Facebook and social media. I think he was afraid of all of the weird sort of things that you read about them spying on you and taking your data and all of that. And he said he's going off social media. But he'd been doing, the last I heard, he was doing some trips abroad. He went to Mexico and he was investigating Maria, I think she was called Maria, the strange alien corpse that they were saying was real. And he found some really interesting stuff. As we did some documentaries with an online paranormal, I can't remember what they're called, begins with G. I did a documentary with Barry talking about the experience, and it's still there somewhere on YouTube. So he was doing that. He was doing sort of documentaries for this online paranormal website. But no, I haven't seen him doing any talks or television appearances. He's gone very quiet. I would love to see him again because he's a fascinating guy.
He sounds it as well, because I always used to watch, Ghost Hunters International, and he always had that really calming, Irish charm, and very, this is what this is and this is what this is. So I think it would be brilliant to get back in contact with him.
Oh, yeah.
And would you go back to visit the Fae, do you think?
Oh, without a doubt, I'd love to. I felt like we just touched the tip of the iceberg. Barry had found some kind of documents to say that in the Fairy Hill were actually tunnels. But again, apparently a local farmer had a key to a door that led to some of these tunnels. And it was also used as a burial ground a long time ago for children because it was a sacred hill. So obviously when people couldn't bury their dead on religious grounds, they would use a place like that. It was a sacred, blessed place. And so there were lots of tunnels. And yeah, I feel like there's more to be investigated there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd love to. Absolutely love the island as well, and people. It
is lovely, isn't it? It's called the Old Isle for a reason. But do you think that we have those sorts of Fay hills and those mountains in like Wales and places in Scotland? Because obviously, where the hill attracts, we've got a hell of a lot of water. Do you think that concentrates that experience a little bit more?
Yeah, and that that experience in Ireland totally opened up my eyes to what we've got here in Wales. And I think the Irish and the Welsh are very, very similar in their Celtic beliefs and folklore. And yeah, we've got fairy hills in Wales. Some of the ancient beliefs are very, very similar. The sort of the types of fairies as well, they've got different names, but very, very similar in description, and the superstitions, definitely. And we've got the burial sites and the cairns, and these ancient stones and rocks with markings on that we don't know what they are. So yeah, I think that there's a lot there that is very, very similar and they're linked. And I guess at one point our islands were joined, so we literally were the same piece of land.
But yeah, it's interesting to figure that they would be, fairy. And we talk about fairies, like you say, like Tinkerbell and all these fairy stories where it's always the happy ever after, but they never describe the darker side of the fae, do they, at all? And it's quite unnerving to hear you talk about, you kept seeing this, a black like dog type like shadow just circling you all, but also the dogs picking up on that and the lights as well. I would never have expected to hear that.
No, and I've not heard it anywhere else, really. The black dog folklore I've heard, there's obviously a lot of black dog folklore all around the UK, and it varies as to which region you're in, as to what it is. But there's no doubt that going back hundreds of years, these black dog sightings were a real thing, and they were believed to be shape-shifting or like messengers of death or from the underworld. And if they were seen, it was seen as some kind of sign, usually an imminent death. And obviously in Wales, we have this concentrated area of Wales where we had the mining and, obviously the coal industry. And I think that there were a lot of people who died. They were very dangerous jobs. So this folklore and superstition was really held on to as a thing of, well, if we believe in it, if we look after the fairies, if we upset the fairies, then they're going to punish us in some way. So the Welsh, and there's still this belief, in some areas that you look after them. If the weather was bad, they would put things out for the fairies, a bit of honey and some milk, and leave the door off the latch so that the fairies could come in. And believe very much that if they didn't do that, they would annoy them, and then some awful fate would, and that they would look for signs, I guess, as a comfort that everything was going to be okay. Like some of us now, we could be a bit OCD perhaps and think, some people might think, right, well, if I tap the steering wheel 5 times before I drive, that's an extreme example. People are like that. If I switch the light switch off and on several times, I'll be safe, everyone will be safe. It's a little bit like that way of thinking. So you can kind of see where they're coming from. And if they saw their grandparents doing it and their aunties doing it, then they would do it. And it would be certain rituals and, little things. Oh, that's bad luck, that's good luck.
Yeah, but it's like any sort of religion, though, isn't it? We do offer things in all religions. The wafer is offered in Holy Communion, and it is an offering, isn't it, to whatever religion you want to bow down to, so to speak. And we have rituals in obviously Yorkshire, and it's like the New Year's Eve rituals. You have a piece of coal to keep you warm all year round. You bury, like you did, a little piece of silver inside a jar, and that is supposed to bring you abundance during the year. And a loaf of bread. It's madness, isn't it? All the superstitions that we have.
It is, and I think people, they're very easy to dismiss it and think, oh, that's rubbish. But maybe there is something in it. If you can go back 300-400 years or further, and they believed in that. they didn't have the amount of technology that I think floods our brains. I think there's a part of our brain that's closed off now to that kind of thing, whereas they perhaps were more open to it, because they weren't watching TV, they weren't on the internet, and they maybe were a bit more aware of their surroundings, a bit more aware of animal behaviour, that kind of thing, about plant law, and they were more observant of that kind of thing. So if they recorded that certain things would happen, you know, who's to say it's not true? And I think maybe we just don't pay attention anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's true, because back in those days, you know, they didn't have the social distractions that we've got today. You know, the men would go out into the fields to work, and, you know, they would probably come home and speak, you know, probably wouldn't even speak to their wives about what they'd experienced, if they'd experienced something. But then the wives would be, you know, quite open to it, and possibly would discuss that with friends and what have you. But like you say, if they're offering, and they've done that for hundreds and hundreds of years, it's kind of like a tradition, isn't it? That they're going to continue. And I think it's interesting. I love listening to the stories about the Fae, because it's not something that I would have actually delved into had I not have listened to that story. But it's kind of piqued my interest now to kind of sit there and say, hang on a second, there must be something out there that we can document, that we can potentially, you know, how cool would it have been if you'd have had a camera just fixated and being able to capture, you know, these little beings? But are they intelligent enough to know that if there is a camera there, they're not going to show themselves?
Exactly. I think we all sort of said at the time, you know, we went looking for them the night before up on that hill, and yet it was like they were watching us the whole time, and that they were keeping their distance. And then they decided to show themselves to a small group of us when they on their terms. And we didn't.
Females?
No, there were a couple of guys there as well. Which was interesting,
that, isn't it?
Well, the one guy was quite skeptical before. He was a friend of Barry's, helping him out, and he was like blown away by it, because he was a skeptic, and he was like, I wouldn't have believed this. If anybody else listening to this story, he said, he wouldn't blame anyone for thinking what a load of crap, that's rubbish. But it is as I describe it, you know, and we all had the same experience. But no, none of us whipped out our camera or anything like that. It was just the fact that we were relaxed and talking, and maybe it attracted them in. I just don't know. It was weird. And the whole weather thing, like, how did that work? How did it? I don't know how that happened. Like, we were just this little pocket where our fire was, without a drop of rain or wind on us, and yet all around us we could see it was like a wall of rain all around us. It was insane. It feels like a dream. Yeah,
because you would like to think that if they were there, they would be protecting you from the elements, because they say that the Fae do control the elements an awful lot in the places where they are. And I would probably say that they were protecting you, but obviously the little ring of people that, you know, the lights that you saw could have possibly been like that invisible shield where the rain and the wind couldn't get to you, because they were interested in what you were having to say.
I think they were. And I think, you know, we give them these different sort of labels or names, but there is this thing with elementals. If they were maybe elementals, what some people understand as elementals, that if they can control the weather, they can control sort of climates and the land. Maybe that's what they were doing. But we'll never know. There was this most amazing rainbow the next day, and it was like something out of a movie scene. I mean, obviously Ireland is stunning anyway, but it was like the whole weekend was like surreal, you know. I think where I live here in Wales, there's a certain amount of, I live near a place called Clydach Gorge. So if you research Clydach Gorge, there's a lot of history. As they say, Shakespeare wrote A Midsummer Night's Dream here in Clydach Gorge, and there's a lot of stories about fairies around here and shapeshifters. I think people would believe that they saw a black animal like a rabbit, that it was a fairy, that it would shapeshift into some sort of goblin figure. And we've seen things happen, like there's been a lot of industrial work here. They've been developing this road, the Heads of the Valleys Road, which has been this huge development, and it's gone right through Clydach Gorge, and some of the protected area has been debated and under a lot of scrutiny, with eco warriors wanting to save certain trees and what have you. And there are people that believe that the fairies are very upset about this being built, and we've had things like landslides and things like that happen, and it does make you think, you know, are they angry, and can they manipulate the land to show that they're upset in some way? You know,
there is a possibility, though, isn't there? It's very interesting. It is something that I desperately want to research as well, and have a look into that. Because I mean, when you first came on, we had a little bit of a chat about what we was going to discuss, and now it's kind of like, I'm absolutely loving this topic. It's you know, because we talk about the Festival of the Unexplained being quite a paranormal online event, but paranormal is such a wide umbrella, isn't it, for, you know, all different types of weird and wonderful things that I want to say. But the Fae now, that's piqued my interest massively. So maybe we need to, when COVID's gone, maybe we should go out, the three of us, and we'll have a look and see, you know, see what we can find.
And the interesting thing as well about fairy folklore, if you do research it and you start going into other countries, you know, just all over the world, Australia, Africa, they've all got their own versions of these fairy figures, different names, but they all boil down to very similar descriptions. And when they were a thing, you know, hundreds of years ago, we didn't have internet or even books. We didn't even have books. So how is it that so many stories of these creatures, these fairies, are the same? But that, you know,
in different continents.
Exactly. So
it's strange. You can't have, you know, it's like having two separate experiences, but at the same time of the same thing, isn't it? You just So there must be something in it, because otherwise they wouldn't have documented it, would they?
100%. Yeah. And whether or not they're a physical thing, or are they interdimensional, which is what I tend to think, that this is an interdimensional world that sometimes we get glimpses of.
This is what my next question was. It was kind of going to go down that route. You know, do you think that the fairies are actually fairies? Because obviously we talk about elementals being these, you know, these gargoyle type creatures and things like that. But do you think that they might be extraterrestrial beings instead, that are coming down and just seeing exactly what we're up to, and they're having these protectors, and they've got the ability to shapeshift?
Yeah, very, very possibly. It's something that I have thought about, and I think some of it could well be, yes. I do feel like we're only aware of very little. We believe what we see. We believe what, like, that's a pen right in front of me. You know, but we don't, there's a lot we don't understand and we don't see. Even within our own vision, I think, you know, what type of colours we can see and things like that. And I just think there is these other worlds that are parallel to ours. And yes, I totally believe in aliens, if you want to call them that, but other beings, 100%. And I'm absolutely fascinated oh gosh, there's a guy that's somewhere in South Yorkshire. I'm trying to think of his name now. I've got his books. Hang on, what's his name? Truth Proof, isn't it? His books of Paul. Oh gosh, he's brilliant. Hang on, I've got to get his book. This guy opens up. Paul Sinclair. I've got all his books, and he covers all of these questions, some very, very strange activity in the area. Where is he from now? I should know this because I've interviewed him. Bridlington. So where's that? In South Yorkshire?
That's East Yorkshire, is that? So that's very near Hull.
Yeah. Well,
because Hull is apparently, there's been quite a lot of reports over in the Hull port of a spaceship like craft disappearing into the water in Hull. And then a couple of days later, I can't remember who actually reported it now, but a couple of days later, they saw the army there, and they were actually surrounding this beach area, and people are asking what had happened, and they wouldn't tell them, but then all the Men in Black rumors started to happen then, and say, look, this is, you shouldn't be talking about this, and there's a subterranean underwater base that they're using for testing and things. And it's like, oh my gosh.
I know. And it seems absolutely crazy until it's all in Paul's book.
Yeah.
He's the most down-to-earth guy that you'd ever meet. And he just tells it as it is. He doesn't even suggest what he thinks it might be. He literally just reports the facts. But he goes into strange sightings of strange creatures, the black dog figures, anything. But when you put it all together, so you might get a group of people that investigate ghosts, another group of people that are interested in aliens, and another group of people who are interested in the fairies, and they don't talk to each other. When you put it all together collectively, things do start coming. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
And it's like cross-referencing, isn't it? You kind of like, you'll take something of something of the fae, then you'll take something of the paranormal, and everything. It's like that little ribbon, isn't it, that binds it all together.
Yeah, exactly. And you start to then think, well, hang on, are we all investigating one and the same thing? Is it the same phenomena, but we're just putting it under different umbrellas? And we've got a very similar sort of thing going on in Pembrokeshire, that there's some strange sightings and UFOs over the coast of Pembrokeshire. And again, I don't think there's anybody like Paul down there reporting in the depth that he has. But it makes you then think, well, it just takes one person to be interested enough to document all this. So we need people all over the country. And then imagine what kind of evidence we would have if everybody looked out for different things,
It'd be interesting to see, what this lockdown has actually done, because obviously we're not going out, we're not going into the mountains, we're not walking or anything like that. I wonder what they're thinking at the moment. Have they all left us alone, so to speak?
Well, I bet they're quite like that. I'm thinking, from an investigation point of view, it might be quite nice to, some of the places have been investigated to death, haven't they? Especially one commercially ghost hunted. And I bet the spirits have had a nice rest. And I'd like to think that when we go back into there, we might get some activity. Yeah. Then maybe they'll be ready to talk to us again. I don't know. But it would be
and we're talking about paranormal activity, but me and you went to the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre as part of a, just a small group. And there is another experience. That night was unbelievable. I have never had a night like it.
Yeah, that was incredible. And that back room was very, very creepy. There was just this sinister atmosphere. It was the type of room that, when you want to go to the toilet and you're on your own, you have to run past the door of it because you think there's somebody there. You had that feeling the whole time. And there was that mirror in the corner, and then that shelf And when we were sat around that table, that shelf moved and it rattled.
Yeah, and it was the voice as well that we heard whilst we were calling out, because when we were calling out, we heard the voice, and I was like, did you hear that? And we played it back on the voice recorder, and you could hear it as clear as day. And it was a male voice, and he didn't like women. He didn't like us being there. And the dresser was physically shaking. I have never seen anything like that.
I haven't ever seen anything that physical before. You know, the voices, we were getting so much through on the voice recorder, and that was happening at the same time.
It's just I'm just like, even now I talk about this all the time, because recently I've been having these weird experiences in the house where I am at the moment, because obviously I'm locked down, so I'm at my partner's in Wales, which obviously you know about. But the thing is, you see, it's these experiences started that night, and your face said it all, because I just remember, and I kept saying to you about the little girl that was there, and she had pigtails in, and she was dancing around. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I just recall your face was an absolute picture.
Yeah, I'm not very often. I'm scared, you know, because we do this, and you kind of get a bit of a thick skin, so you become a little bit immune, and you can go for so many investigations where nothing happens. When something actually does happen on that level, it really does take you by surprise. And I was already feeling uncomfortable in that room, and I couldn't explain why. But there were certain objects in there that were had very dark history attached to them, and they, you know, they're not protected or cleansed. You know, there's a couple of items in there that have been removed from a murder scene as well.
Yeah.
That, you know, I felt very uncomfortable in there generally. So I just felt collectively with all of those items, there was something feeding off the negativity in there. And it didn't like us, because we were getting so close to perhaps the truth. We were talking to people, we were talking to spirit. And that guy did not like us, did he? So there was a little girl afraid of him, wasn't she?
Inside the main area, like I think it was the main, like, as soon as you walked in, I think it's the doll room now. I'm not sure. I'd probably have to speak to Jane. But where the doll room was, there was the antique wheelchair. And I remember you being stood to my right, and you were a little bit like on a diagonal to me, but you were stood a bit further back from me, so near to where like the corner of the room was, and you were stood with Evan. Neil was stood in front of Evan. I was stood on my own, and then another person was just stood by, you know, setting up some recording equipment on the wheelchair. And I just remember just, you know, minding my own business, and then all of a sudden I went,
yes, oh my God, yeah, I've got goosebumps.
And I just remember watching, and the only way I've described it like this all the time, it was like a movement of water, like fish scales, and it was like moving around the table, but it was at that thing. And I said, oh, she's just walking around the table. Can you see her? And then I stopped, and then I just watched it, and all of a sudden I could see it materialize, and I went,
yeah.
And then your face, I looked at you, what have you just seen? And I was like, did you not see that? And I talk about it all the time, and it's like, oh my God. And I just remember jumping around the room then going, oh, I can't believe I've just seen that.
It was like a whoosh of like you said, it was like water. And she whooshed around you. And I was looking at your face, and I could see you like, oh, and it was like around your legs. And yeah, it was just insane. It was the old lady that was connected to the chair, wasn't it?
Gosh, yeah. I was just like, oh my God. But recently, and this is where things have started to get a little bit more eerie. Like, I've been in bed of a night time, and Mark doesn't believe in any of this. He's very skeptical. He's very rational about everything. And I've gotten into bed, and I've just looked up, and I can see like what I think is a head forming out of, the only thing that I can say is this liquid material. And and then I look at it, and it's in the dark, so it's obviously illuminescent, so I can see it. And then it just disappears. And I thought, oh, it's my eyes, I'm tired. But then it happened again. But I've realized now that this starts to materialize at how cool this person is. Now, in this house, when I first walked in, there was an old lady and she said, oh, hello, dear. You know, you've come to see me. I was like, I'm not come to see you. But anyway. But then I've been made aware of a gentleman as well who's here, but he's around about 5'10", 5'11". And it was literally about 2 weeks ago. And I was just laid in bed and I literally looked and I could see the head and the shoulders forming. And I nudged Mark really quickly and I was like, what the hell was that? And he was like, what's going on? And I just said to him, did you not see it? Can you not see it? And he was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, then. And I just dismissed it then. But then I had a really strange dream then. And my grandmother was telling me, this is your next step in your journey. And I was like, okay. And I was like, this is uncanny. But she said, we brought it before, but you weren't ready, but now you are. And it's kind of like that. So I started to see a little bit more things. But it's
formation. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's weird. I mean, yeah. So that's what made it your first time at the Haunted Antique Centre that you've seen something in that form.
In that form, yeah.
It's weird how they take on different forms, because I've seen 3 apparitions in my lifetime, like full-bodied apparitions, what you'd call that. And every single one has looked completely different. So it is weird, because I don't know whether some people just see them in one form and then other people are able to see them in different ways. I don't know why they take on different forms. It's weird, but I saw the one, how you describe that is more fitting with an apparition that I saw at Margam Castle. And they say it was the Grey Lady. I obviously don't know, but it was a woman. And that was a very fluid kind of apparition, because I could just see like a mist forming down this corridor, and it kind of whooshed at me suddenly. And it literally floored me. I thought she was going to hit me, and she flew at my face. And I dropped to the floor, and it took me a long time to recover physically. I was shaking, and that was weird. So that's perhaps similar to, why is it this fluid? What is it that we're seeing? I don't know.
Yeah, but it's like you say, though, I've seen full-bodied apparitions before now, and I've seen people with just half a torso stood in the middle of a television, and it's kind of like, what are you doing? And then I realized that would have been a doorway or a window, and it's kind of like, all right, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I just find it fascinating what we've experienced, but also because you've got quite a lot, you love history, don't you? And you love looking into research and researching the past and getting the information. And I just find it, I do find it amazing. But your book that you wrote about the, the folklore and the supernatural and everything, do you talk about that with us?
Well, the book basically, I've got it here as it happens. So that's the book, Dead Haunted. But it came about because I was looking into the history of. I started off looking in my local area, just through the old newspaper archives, because you can now access them online, all the Welsh newspapers. So I started. You can put keywords in, and so I would put in the village name, death, that was another keyword, or murder, that kind of thing. And I would anything really dark and sinister, and obviously ghost was another keyword. And I would pull up these old reports from 1900s, 1800s, of not just of ghost sightings, and there were a lot, and they would report them very factually, like woman saw in Blaenavon saw a ghost, and so they'd report it like it happened. But also the deaths and the murders and the bodies found, And then they obviously didn't have DNA, they didn't have proper trials in those days or anything. So a lot of people got away with actual murder because they couldn't prove it. And I have always thought that if there was an actual spirit ghost sighting, as opposed to, you know, perhaps I think a lot of us see some of the things that are just like a tape, you know, recording in time, like that kind of apparition. An actual haunting, I've always thought there must be a reason. There's a reason why they can't rest. So they've got a story, they want us to find something out, they want to tell us something. You know, they're not able to rest for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So the stories in my book were some of the most interesting articles that I found, where there was no conclusion as to what happened to the body, or a ghost was seen, and there was never any follow-up article to explain was it ever debunked, you know, what happened. So I made it up. So I channeled it, and I wrote the fictional story around what happened. So you've got your factual story and then my fictional take on what happened. And I do feel I did really channel into what I felt happened at the time. So yeah, it's a mix between fact and fiction. People say, well, what is it? And I call it faction, because there is truth in it. The stories that you see that are printed, the newspaper articles, are real, but then the story that follows is what I came up with.
Yeah,
because I feel like a real ghost, a real haunting, they want us to tell their story before they can rest, or something. They want something to be, they want to be forgiven, maybe a lot of the time. They want some kind of to draw a line under it, some kind of conclusion, which I think a story can do.
And it's a lovely book though, because I have got a copy, and I bought it quite a while ago, and it was so I think it was Halloween of last year, and Mark's sister said to me, oh, I'd like to read that book, can I borrow it? So I thought, well, I might as well just buy her own copy. So where can people buy your book from, Claire?
It's for sale on Amazon, and you know, I don't make any profit from it. I just priced it pretty cheap. It just covers the cost of printing. So yeah, I don't even know what it's up for. I think it's $5.99, something like that. But yeah, Amazon. I just wanted my stories read, you know, and it's self-published. So, you know, when I read through it, I find the odd thing that I think, oh, I might one day re-edit this slightly, but it was my first effort, and you know, and I feel like there should be more stories added. I've just not had the mojo, obviously, lately to do it, but there's definitely more stories to be told. And one of the stories is actually Margam Castle and the murder of Robert Scott, the gamekeeper. And he's quite, if anybody's investigated Margam Castle before, they'll know Robert Scott's like the famous ghost that haunts the stairs, that he was murdered on the castle grounds, and somebody was tried and hung for the murder. But I sort of did a lot of digging, and I have got a suspicion that the wrong person was hanged for his murder. So that's all in there, what my take on that is.
Exciting. I think when lockdown's all finished, I think I need to have a trip down to Margam, because that's not too far away from you either, is it? So it's going to be so nice to see you both.
Yeah, I love Margam. I've investigated there a few times, and I've seen a full apparition there. So undoubtedly it's haunted. I love it. You know, even the security guard, he thought we were a load of nutcases, and we sort of pressed him a bit and said, oh, come on now, you lock up here every night. Do you believe in ghosts? And he said, well, no. And then he went, mind you, I have heard children running around upstairs and there's been nobody in the building. But he thinks it's just his mind playing tricks on him.
And it's funny that, isn't it? Especially when you go into a building and there's no children there and you hear them.
Yeah, they're very active. Yeah.
I'm hoping this lockdown's made them reserve their energy, ready for us all to go hunting when we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it does, and I hope that you know, maybe more places will be open for investigation, because obviously it does bring in some income to certain places, like, you know, Skirrid Inn, for example, is, you know, a quiet pub near me, very local to me, and they do rely on the investigations. It keeps the building going, the money on the investigations. So there's so many pubs that have had to close, and they've been forced to close because of COVID. And maybe, just maybe, this could be open up some more places for us to investigate. It would benefit the business owners as well, if they would allow us to investigate. And there might be some new places.
Yeah, and I think paranormal investigators anyway usually tend to get a bad name because we go out on a night time. You know, some of us dress up in dark clothing with torches, and we look like a band of misfits sometimes. But I do think there's a lot of places now that are kind of turning their attentions away and realizing that not all paranormal investigators are these urban explorers who break and enter into, you know, condemned buildings and things like that. So hopefully there may be a turn for the better, especially like with properties like the National Trust and, you know, guided paranormal investigations. I mean, I've got Nostell Priory near me, and it's screaming to be investigated. It's absolutely stunning. But, you know, who knows? Maybe they may take a U-turn on it, and maybe they may let, you know, just teams, even if it's just teams, you know.
Yeah, they have a reputation, a good team. There are lots of good teams with a good reputation. They have got the proper insurances in place. And that would be amazing. I would love to investigate some of the National Trust places, because they are incredible. And I understand it, that they've got, especially places that are furnished, and they've got a lot of valuable things there in place. I guess it, but, you know, maybe they will need the income that it would provide, or just open up a small amount of the building would be great, wouldn't it? If we could just have some of it, maybe. I don't know, but it would be
great. And, you know, I'm so looking forward to seeing you and Lindsay again very, very soon. And it's going to be a long catch up, I think. So we might need a couple of days.
Oh yeah, we need to plan something, don't we? And definitely, we've got so much to catch up on. I feel like I've not investigated anything for too long.
Well, we'll change that soon enough. But Claire, thank you so much for joining me today. It's, you know, I've absolutely loved the talk about the Fae and your experiences, and you've kind of piqued my interest now. So I hope you've piqued people's interest as well, and hopefully we start investigating the Fae a little bit more, and documentation as well. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
You're more than welcome.
And I'm sure I'll be speaking to you very soon.
Yeah, 100%. Good luck with the rest of the festival.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much. So guys, you know, we're still raising money for Calm, a suicide prevention charity. And currently we've raised £907. Now, if you can give a little bit, please do, because it all matters. And we understand times are tough at the moment. So, you know, please give what you can, if you can. This is a free online event, and we've been putting this on since 7 o'clock last night, and we're running right through today and all through tomorrow and through the night tonight until 7 o'clock tomorrow. So please stay tuned. We've got Barry John, the medium, next, and he is phenomenal. So stay tuned and take care.